The courtroom clock struck precisely at 9 a.m., and the seats were already filled. At the front table sat Danielle Hart, a 34-year-old mother of two and an ER nurse, still in her faded blue scrubs. Her hair was loosely tied back in a bun, her ID badge clipped to her side, and her sneakers worn down from a grueling 12-hour night shift she'd just finished. She hadn't had time to go home, running trauma codes, comforting families, and saving lives. The minute she clocked out, she came straight to court. This hearing was not optional. It was crucial. It determined partial custody of her children, challenged by her ex-husband, who recently hired a lawyer and claimed she was emotionally unstable and incapable of parenting. Danielle had the evidence to defend herself, documentation, witnesses. But she wasn't prepared for what happened the moment the judge saw her. Judge Lenora Barron, a sharp-suited 62-year-old, known for her meticulousness, glanced up from her bench and scanned the room. When her eyes landed on Danielle's scrubs, she froze. "Miss Hart," the judge's voice was clipped. "Are you under the impression that this is a hospital?" Danielle blinked, taken aback, but calmly replied, "No, Your Honor. I just finished my shift and came straight here." Judge Barron raised an eyebrow. "This is a courtroom, not a break room. You are expected to dress appropriately." A soft murmur swept through the courtroom. Danielle's lawyer opened his mouth to speak, but the judge swiftly cut him off. "Save it, Miss Hart. You are presenting yourself before this court in a child custody case, and you show up in what can only be described as pajamas." The courtroom went silent. Danielle sat up straighter, her posture defiant. The eyes of the gallery were upon her, some in shock, others embarrassed for her. But Danielle? She didn't shrink. She met the judge's gaze directly and spoke softly, yet firmly. "With all due respect, Your Honor, these pajamas still have blood on them. It's not mine. It belongs to a 7-year-old I helped save from cardiac arrest at 4:17 this morning. I didn't have time to change. I only had time to choose. Save a life or be 5 minutes late to change for you." The entire courtroom fell into stunned silence. The judge opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The truth had entered the room, and it was wearing scrubs. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights as the stillness stretched on. Judge Barron stared down from the bench, her lips tight. She hadn't expected such a response. Not from someone wearing blue polyester and sneakers with half-tied laces. But Danielle didn't flinch. Her voice remained steady, her hands marked by 4 tape, gloves, and the ink from the trauma board in the ER. Her lawyer, Matt Listester, exchanged a look between her and the judge, clearly stunned into silence. But the gallery? They were anything but still. People leaned forward in their seats. One woman, sitting toward the back, discreetly pulled out her phone and started recording. Judge Barron exhaled sharply. "This is not a stage for dramatics, Miss Hart." Danielle tilted her head, not disrespectfully, but with undeniable sincerity.
"No, ma'am.
This is a courtroom, and I respect it enough to show up, even if it meant not changing out of the clothes I wore to save someone's son." The judge's gavel slammed down once, sharp and forceful. "Let's proceed." But it was too late. Outside that courtroom, the first clip had already made its way to TikTok. The headline? "Nurse scolded for wearing scrubs to court." Her response? Pure dignity. The video exploded. By lunchtime, it had reached 600,000 views. By 2 p.m., it had soared past 5 million. Danielle's voice spread like wildfire across Twitter, with people rallying behind her. "Save a life or change for you." I chose the life. Hashtags like #LetHerWearScrubs, #NurseJustice, and #RespectTheUniform began trending. Local news outlets picked it up by 3 p.m. By dinner time, national anchors were running the clip during their evening broadcasts. But inside the courtroom, Danielle had no idea any of this was happening. She wasn't concerned with views or viral hashtags. She was watching the clock because, after this hearing, she needed to pick up her daughter from school in the same scrubs. The very same scrubs that now carried more than just blood. They carried a story. The next time she stood to speak, the silence in the courtroom wouldn't come from shock. It would come from reverence. The opposing counsel, Mr. Lel Grant, a slick private attorney dressed in a tailored gray suit with cufflinks likely worth more than Danielle's monthly rent, stood up and approached the podium. He smirked, not cruelly, but with the kind of entitled arrogance that made you want to cringe. "Miss Hart," he said, "can you confirm that you voluntarily chose to work a night shift before your court appearance today?" Danielle nodded. "Yes, I did." "And knowing full well that you had a custody hearing this morning?" he pressed. "Yes," she confirmed, unwavering. "So, would it be fair to say that you prioritized your work over preparing for your case, over your children?" A sharp intake of breath rippled through the gallery. But Danielle didn't flinch. She leaned slightly forward, her hands clasped together, her gaze steady. "No, sir. I prioritized the life of a stranger's child. Because if it were my own child coding on a table at 4 a.m., I'd want someone to stay too. I didn't choose between my job and my children. I chose to be the kind of mother I'd want to show up if they ever needed saving." For a moment, even Mr. Grant paused, taken aback. But Danielle didn't stop. "And for the record, every night I work keeps a roof over their heads," she continued, her voice unwavering. "My uniform may not impress this courtroom, but it feeds them, protects them, and pays for the therapy they needed after their father walked out." A murmur rippled through the gallery. One woman in the back dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Judge Barron gripped her gavel, but didn't strike it. For the first time that morning, she said nothing. Mr. Grant cleared his throat, attempting to regain his composure. "You're clearly emotional. That's understandable." Danielle's voice was calm as she replied, "I'm not emotional. I'm exhausted. But there's a difference. One comes from weakness. The other comes from doing everything you can to hold a family together while the world tells you that you're unfit for not having time to iron your blouse." And just like that, the energy in the room shifted, not in the verdict, but in the atmosphere. Because in a courtroom meant to measure evidence, procedure, and appearance, someone had just reminded everyone what true strength looked like. And it looked a lot like blood-stained scrubs, 2-day-old mascara, and a woman who didn't apologize for showing up real. After Danielle's defense, the courtroom sat in a thick silence where decorum battled with conscience. Mr. Grant quietly returned to his seat, momentarily defeated. Flipping through pages that suddenly felt insignificant, Danielle's mind raced. The weight of the moment hung in the air. Judge Barron called for a recess, but as the bailiff began ushering people out of the courtroom, Danielle's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, if I may, before the recess, I'd like to call our witness." Judge Barron let out a sigh. "You may proceed." The doors opened, and in walked Dr. Leah Morales, the chief of emergency medicine at St. Joseph's Regional Hospital. In her early 50s, Dr. Morales exuded composure, her crisp white coat layered over her business attire. Without a hint of hesitation or reliance on notes, she walked directly to the witness stand. Danielle's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't known that Dr. Morales would be there. Her eyes widened in surprise. Once sworn in, Dr. Morales turned her gaze to the bench. "I'm here to clarify what Danielle Hart does, because it seems her scrubs were mistaken for laziness or disrespect." The tension in the courtroom thickened. Judge Barron's posture stiffened as Dr. Morales continued. "Danielle Hart is the nurse I trust when the new ones freeze in trauma. She's the nurse who stays with dying children when their parents are stuck in traffic, holding their hands. She's the one who skipped lunch 26 days in a row last spring so her colleagues could eat. She didn't wear scrubs to insult this court. She wore them because she stayed to stabilize a child who stopped breathing, then rushed out the door to fight for custody of her own children." Dr. Morales turned toward Judge Barron, her voice steady but fierce. "If you think that's disrespect, then I recommend every robe in this building visit a trauma ward on a Friday night." A hush fell over the courtroom. The court reporter's fingers froze above her keys. Judge Barron blinked, momentarily taken aback. Then, without skipping a beat, Dr. Morales reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded note. "Your Honor, I'd also like to enter into the record this letter written by the parents of the boy Danielle saved this morning." She unfolded the note and handed it to the court clerk. The letter was short, Just 4 lines.
It read,
"To whom it may concern. If Danielle Hart had not stayed past her shift, our son would not be breathing. Give her children back. She's earned them 100 times over." The gallery was silent, save for the sound of muffled sniffles. Judge Barron didn't speak. Not yet. But something behind her eyes shifted, and even the gavel seemed reluctant to break the stillness. Danielle, still seated, wiped away tears, not from weakness, but because someone had finally spoken the truth she hadn't known how to ask for. And at that moment, the courtroom would never be the same again. The court recessed for lunch, but the conversation outside was no longer about custody rights or legal technicalities. It was about her. The nurse in scrubs, the mother who stood tall, the woman who chose a child's heartbeat over courtroom etiquette. She had shown the entire legal system what real grace under pressure looks like. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Dozens of people were now talking about the nurse in scrubs, the woman who wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against her. News cameras swarmed, and social media buzzed with a story that no one had expected to unfold in such a powerful way. The courtroom may have recessed for lunch, but the world outside had already begun to take notice.